customer service really is the new marketing. It's the new public relations, because that's what people are going to be talking about, especially if there's a problem. Customers are, they can be very forgiving if there's a problem with a product or a service and they bring it to your attention and you fix it right away, and you fix it the first time. Well, then people are very forgiving. But if you don't fix it, or if you delay, or if you say you're going to get back with somebody by next week and you don't get back in touch with them, or you don't return a phone call or an email, these are what people remember. Those are the memories that you're leaving with your guests, is that you don't really care about them when there is a problem, because all businesses are great when there's no problems, but it's when there really is a problem, how you take care of that. So, for instance, on a cruise ship, if somebody comes to us on a Friday and says, oh, my air conditioning isn't working, we can't say, oh, sorry, the weekends were closed, we'll get somebody there on a Monday. That's not good enough. We're going to say we'll have somebody there in less than 30 minutes and we'll have that problem fixed. Because you can't have somebody with their toilet not working or their air conditioning not working. They paid a lot of money for this cruise. They don't want to hear that, oh, it's the weekend. So it's the same thing on land-based businesses. How quickly do you get back to the customer who has a problem?
So our topic today on today's show is really about customer service. And it's funny, I've been doing this show for almost 4 years and we've never talked explicitly about customer service. And when you think about conversations and relationships at work, I mean, you can't avoid talking about how do we do that better with customers. So today I had the wonderful pleasure of having Paul Rutter, who is the owner and chief experience officer of Smooth Sailing Communication. He's coming on. And the reason why his company is called Smooth Sailing Communication is Paul was in the cruise business for 40 years. He was cruise director for big cruise ships, and he really knows what this customer experience is all about, because after all, when you're on a cruise, it's all about that guest experience, and they want to make it so memorable that you sign up to do another cruise. So what I love about my conversation with Paul, that I want you to listen real close to, is we really talk about two things. We go deep, but we talk about two things. First, how do you have healthy relationships with coworkers and staff when essentially you're living with each other 24/7? They're on these ships together. So how do we create that team chemistry that's so critical in order to create this memorable experience? So he talks a lot about that on the employee staff side. But then, of course, we talk about it on the guest side. How do you create such a memorable experience that guest says, I'm willing to put a deposit down and I want to sign up for another cruise? And what does it look like to exceed a customer's expectations? Now, that sounds like an obvious question. We hear it all the time, but I actually asked Paul, what does that mean? So listen really close, and I think you're going to really enjoy the conversation. I had a great time with it. And then at the very end, of course, as I normally do, I will share with you my many notes that I took.
The Workplace Therapist Show is sponsored by the Leadership Foundry. Bringing a cutting-edge, real-world approach to leadership development, the Leadership Foundry partners with each client organization to create a custom-tailored experience, virtual or in person, that combines innovative leadership content, world-class facilitators, and one-on-one coaching to ensure your leaders have everything they need to grow and thrive. To find out more and to design your one-of-a-kind program, visit myleadershipfoundry.com.
Paul, I am so excited to have you on the show today. Your background is so fascinating, and I can't wait to hear some of the stories and adventures that I'm sure you experienced being part of the cruise world for 40 years. So maybe a good starting place, and there's lots of angles that we can take in our conversation today. We can talk about the challenges of living with coworkers. We can also talk about the challenges of living with customers, because you've seen and dealt with both. But before we jump into that, just for my listeners, share a little bit about your story. Like what got you into the cruise business, and what was kind of your journey in that world?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation, Brandon. I really appreciate it. As you said, I come to you from over 40 years in the hospitality, the travel, and the cruise industries. How I got into it is actually an interesting story. If we have a few minutes, I actually took my dog for a walk and walked away with a job on a cruise ship. It was incredible. I was in Connecticut. I was born and raised in West Hartford, Connecticut. I just graduated at Boston University. And I was taking my dog for a walk right across the street at the high school that I went to. And this one particular day, it was October. I had already graduated college. I have a teaching degree, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So I took my dog across the street to the high school to get him some exercise. And the principal of the high school walked out, who I happened to know. And he said, so what are you doing with your life? You graduated college. What's going on? And I said, well, I'm probably going to take a year off. I want to travel. I had bought an old VW bus, which was on one wheel, basically. And he looked at me and said, well, how'd you like to work on a cruise ship? And I actually looked around to make sure he was talking to me, because I wasn't sure what he was talking about. I'd never seen a cruise ship, been on a cruise ship, never entered my mind. And it turned out that he happened to know somebody at the school, and they were starting a project. This was in the late 70s. They were putting a few slot machines on the cruise ships, and they needed people to make change and to be the cashier. And so I accepted. And if I hadn't taken my dog for a walk at that particular time on that particular day, my life would be completely changed.
I've already started my notes. My first note I wrote down was take dog for a walk.
And get exercise.
Who knows where that's going to lead? You could end up with a job.
Exactly.
You could end up with a career. Your career all came from that walk that you took.
Exactly.
Okay, so then you started the career, but 40 years is a nice, rich story. So what was some of your kind of highlights or progressions within that?
Well, it's funny because when I had the initial interview, the gentleman who interviewed me said, okay, I just need you for 3 months. Just stay for 3 months, and then if it doesn't work out, I'll have time to get somebody else. And 3 months turned into 40 years because I just enjoyed it so much. I was in my early 20s, as I said, just graduated college. So, of course, I'm traveling around the Caribbean. Then they said, oh, this ship is going to Europe. How'd you like to stay on the ship and go to Europe? What am I going to say no to that? So it just blossomed from that. And when I was on the ship working in the casino, I saw all the other positions on board, and I really enjoyed and liked watching what the cruise staff were doing and the cruise director. These were the fun people in charge of the activities and the entertainment. And so initially, after about 8 or 9 years, I left the casino part of the ship and transferred over to the cruise staff part of it, and just worked my way up from cruise staff to sports director to assistant cruise director. And then finally, in the early 90s, I became cruise director on the largest ship in the world, the Sovereign of the Seas for Royal Caribbean Cruise Line. And I really haven't looked back. And so it's really just a progression. And as you say, the best thing you can do is take your dog for a walk, because you never know what's going to happen from there.
Beautiful story, beautiful journey. Okay, so I want to get in a little bit into some of the ways I think you might be able to guide us. So, let's start talking about relationships with our coworkers. So what are some of the unique challenges when you're with coworkers 24/7? What were some of the unique challenges that you saw? And how did you either help coworkers navigate that, or how might you recommend we navigate those kinds of things?
So as you mentioned early, the cruise industry is one of the unique industries where we actually live with our customers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And so when I talk with land-based businesses, the first question I ask is, how would you treat your customers differently if you had to live with them? What sort of different policies and procedures would you have in place? And so I get into a discussion about the customers. And then the other part of that unique dynamic, as you mentioned, is we live with our coworkers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So the person that we just worked with for 8 hours, when we go to our room at night, they could be our roommate. And so what sort of dynamics and what sort of, HR policies and employee engagement policies do we have in place in order to make sure that it's, smooth sailing for everybody? And so when we work on board
that was a good pun, by the way.
Thank you. Smooth sailing. Have to work it in somehow. But one of the unique things about the ship is that we have crew members from probably close to 70 different countries working on board the ship.
Yeah.
So that right there is a unique dynamic where you have all these different cultures coming together for one purpose, and that's for the hospitality and to create a wonderful cruise for our guests. And we should say we're not in the cruise business. We're not in the travel business. We're in the business of creating memories. That's what we do on board cruise ships, is we create memories, because that's what people take away. That's what they remember. And our goal on board, we have one goal, and that's to create such an exceptional experience that exceeds expectations, so that our guests will book their next cruise before the current cruise is over. And if they do that for just a small deposit, we have a 98% a 98% chance that they will take their next cruise with us. And so that's a very high percentage. So what if land-based businesses knew that if you treated your customers right, 98% of the time they would come back to you, and they wouldn't even think about going to your competitor down the street? And so keeping the crew engaged is extremely important, because we have that one goal of creating that exceptional experience. And everybody has to be on the same page. And as we say in the cruise industry, another pun, we all have to be rowing in the same direction, because if we're not, then we're not going to create those memories for our guests. And so that's really the goal for keeping the crew and the employees engaged, is to create those memories for our guests.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. So, something you said in here, there's lots in here, Paul. So one that is very, very clear to me. I often talk about, you can look at businesses, business models, cultures on a spectrum. On one end, it's very transactional. Kind of think Amazon. On the other end, it's very relational. Think you. It's all about building those relationships. So there's a long-term kind of relationship versus just kind of a one and done. And so you're really kind of on that spectrum. And what I found so fascinating, one of the things you hinted on was when you've got so many different coworkers from different backgrounds, it sounds like one of the ways that you keep everybody rowing in the same direction is you get them aligned around the same mission or objective or purpose. In this case, creating memories. So it's okay, everybody, we've got differences, but what we all can agree on is we're here for this one common singular goal.
And one of the things we do is that we celebrate our differences on board. So we may have, people from Jamaica may have a way that they celebrate something. And so if there's a Jamaican Independence Day, then we will celebrate the Jamaicans on board and make sure that the guests get involved with that. Same thing for our Indian crew on board. We will celebrate the differences there. So when you have such cultural differences, we celebrate them. We don't sweep them under the rug and think that everybody's the same. We celebrate those differences, and the guests love that. We sometimes have guests come back on a certain ship just to see a certain crew member, a specific bartender that they enjoy, or a waiter in the dining room. They will stay in touch with these crew members, find out where they're going, and then take a cruise on that specific ship just because they enjoyed the service from that one particular person. And that really says a lot about the culture that we try to have on board the ships, is because, again, it's about those memories. And when we have guests calling the head office saying, oh, I want to know where Mario, the bartender, is. What ship is he on? I'm going to go on that ship. We've had that happen. And even entertainers. We have, piano players or certain singers or whatever. Guests will follow these entertainers from ship to ship as well. And they won't take a cruise unless they know that person is going to be on that ship. And so we celebrate all the differences that we have on board. And that's something that land-based businesses should do as well.
Yeah, so here's something I think very practically and tactically you can help so many businesses with. Because the common complaint I hear is they say, we just don't have time. We don't have time to celebrate successes or have parties. There's just no time. And I think you could make a logical case that in the life of a cruise, there's not a lot of time either. I mean, it's a 24/7. You're constantly trying to create that experience for your guests. So show us kind of behind the scenes. When did you find the time to do that? How did you do that, and when did you do that? How for staff?
If you leave everything to the last minute, you will never find the time. It really takes proper planning. And the whole 5 Ps or 6 Ps, proper preparation prevents poor performance. So you have to plan ahead. So we know that, we'll use the example of Jamaican Independence Day. If we know that's 2 weeks down the line, well, then we'll start working on it. We'll have a cake that we know we're going to make. We're going to have a parade. We're going to get the flags there. We're going to make sure that we've planned properly. And on board our ships, we have a whole HR department on board. And so they really are in charge of all certain of those things. We celebrate birthdays. We know in advance whenever anybody's having a crew member's having a birthday on board, we'll celebrate those birthdays. Again, so our HR department really does a great job keeping everybody informed about these events that happen with the crew. So proper planning certainly helps. I've heard the excuse, we don't have enough time. I just happen to disagree with that. And I say, yes, you can find the time. If it's important enough, you can find the time.
Agreed. Amen. And I think I've been around this planet a little while, but I've never heard the 5 Ps. So I wrote them down. I love it. Proper preparation prevents poor performance.
Actually, if you want another P in there, it's proper preparation prevents piss poor performance.
I don't think you can hear it, but the tremendous laughter from the production studio. From
Okay.
Ingrid and my wife Emily, who's in there. So they loved it. That's great. So okay, so now I want to flip a little bit, and I really want to talk about the guest experience and how you really create that. Because I'm just going to share my own personal experience. Well, first of all, I'm a relationship guy, and I love service, and I love guest experience. I mean, I'm passionate about it, but more on the consumer side of it than the actual delivery side of it, because I just don't know what goes into it. But I've noticed, at least personally, in the last year, maybe because of stress or all the other pressures in our world, it seems like overall customer service is taking a bit of a tumble during the pandemic. So help us reset. How do you reset the guest experience or the customer experience if we're a business owner or a leader?
Well, if there's one thing that everybody should have realized from this past year, whatever lockdown, it's that businesses cannot compete on price alone. There is always going to be somebody with a less expensive price, a cheaper price, a click away, or, a short drive down. A gas station opens up with cheap gas. Well, another gas station right across the street will open up with even cheaper gas. So you cannot compete on price alone. So customer service really is the new marketing. It's the new public relations, because that's what people are going to be talking about, especially if there's a problem. Customers they can be very forgiving if there's a problem with a product or a service and they bring it to your attention and you fix it right away, and you fix it the first time. Well, then people are very forgiving. But if you don't fix it, or if you delay, or if you say you're going to get back with somebody by next week and you don't get back in touch with them, or you don't return a phone call or an email, these are what people remember. Those are the memories that you're leaving with your guests, is that you don't really care about them when there is a problem, because all businesses are great when there's no problems, but it's when there really is a problem, how you take care of that. So, for instance, on a cruise ship, if somebody comes to us on a Friday and says, oh, my air conditioning isn't working, we can't say, oh, sorry, the weekends were closed, we'll get somebody there on a Monday. That's not good enough. We're going to say we'll have somebody there in less than 30 minutes and we'll have that problem fixed, because you can't have somebody with their toilet not working or their air conditioning not working. They paid a lot of money for this cruise. They don't want to hear that, oh, it's the weekend. So it's the same thing on land-based businesses. How quickly do you get back to the customer who has a problem? I mean, I called an airline the other day. They said, oh, our hold times are longer than 4 hours. We'll call you back. And I'm thinking, excuse me?
Yeah.
You're going to keep me on hold longer than 4 hours? Really? How about hiring a few more customer service representatives to take care of these long lines? And it turned out, I called them at night and they called me back the next day. It was 10 hours. I left my name and number. 10 hours it took to get somebody on the phone. And it really was changing a flight for an airline. And I was trying to give them more money and they were making me work hard just to give them my hard-earned money. So that's a little bit disappointing. But again, customer service is the new marketing. With all the sites where you can complain about Yelp or Reddit, or I don't know if you know this new website called Nextdoor, where communities of neighbors get together and they talk about business. That's where you want your recommendations and your referrals. You want your neighbors and your friends You want your customers referring you to their neighbors and their friends because they believe those recommendations. And so you want your customers to be raving brand ambassadors for your business. It's zero cost marketing. So why wouldn't you do everything to keep your customers happy, knowing that they're going to sing your praises?
I love that. I love that. And the entire production studio erupted with laughter when you said next door, because I will read off next door stuff to my family every single night. So
it's a great website. I've gotten an electrician off of Nextdoor. I've gotten handyman off of Nextdoor, and they come, and you're going to believe your neighbors, but you won't believe an anonymous person on Yelp or Amazon or wherever, but you believe your friends and family and your neighbors.
And sometimes what you'll see someone will complain about a restaurant, and if that restaurant has a strong reputation following, neighbors will kind of start chiming in and say, no, I disagree completely. It's actually a really great family restaurant, and it's we love all these things about it, and you should really give it another try. So you'll see them advocate on your behalf.
And how great is that? I mean, God, that's what you want from your customers.
So I want to ask you, it sounds like a simple question, but I don't think it is. So we often talk in business about we want to exceed our customers' expectations. Okay? But no one really sits down and defines that. And frankly, I don't think many people are really doing a very good job of that. So when you think about what it means to exceed a customer's expectations, how do you define that, and how do you teach other people to think that way? What does it mean to you?
Well, I think right off the top, we know that we've exceeded expectations if they book their next cruise right on board the ship during this cruise.
Got it.
We know that they're coming back.
So you have a measurable thing. It's like they've made a commitment that they want to come back because they were so pleased.
Correct.
So there's a way to measure it.
It's an impulse buy, but they're so happy in the moment that they're thinking, okay, I'm happy with this cruise line. I don't even want to take my chances with another cruise line. So we give them the best deals on board. We'll say, okay, they don't even have to tell us where they want to go. They just have to reserve a cabin on any of the ships. So they can go to Europe, they can go to Alaska, they can go to Asia, they can go to South America. They don't even have to tell us. But if they've reserved a room, it's like $100 deposit, it's nothing. They've saved themselves the expense of having to go out and book another cruise. We know that if they book it on board with us, we know that they're happy with the product, and we know that they're going to come back. And I should also say the other way that we know how we're doing is that we have surveys at the end of every single cruise. We ask our guests, how are we doing? And we have learned so much from them. Now, I know a lot of people don't like to read negative comments or negative complaints, but you really have to, because if there's a pattern that you can see, then that's something that you really have to take care of. When guests or customers complain, that's really a gift that you really have to listen to. They're taking the time out of their schedule in their day to let you know that there's a problem with your business. Most people won't tell you. They'll just walk away and go to your competitor. But if your customers are taking the time to let you know there's a problem, you have to thank them, you have to fix the problem, and you have to get back to them down the road, follow up and follow through, we call it, to let them know that problem has been taken care of. And studies have shown that if you fix that problem, then customers will come back to you again and again. So surveys are very important. I'm sure you know the key question, will you recommend our business to a family or friend? It's called the Net Promoter Score.
Right.
That some businesses use a lot, some businesses don't use it all, but it's a good indication of whether these people are willing to go to bat and recommend you as a proper, a business that they would go back to again.
Yeah. So you actually spelled out many different ways we can think about exceeding expectations. They're measurable. If the customer is willing to sign up for future services or products, that tells you that they're pleased. You can use surveys, but you also went back to when there's a problem, how you fix it, the follow up and follow through. And then earlier you talked about kind of the speed and responsiveness. The component of that is also part of that. Is there anything we can do proactively? So fixing a problem is reactive, but there's a way you can handle that will create that exceeding that expectation. Is there anything that we can do proactively that might exceed a customer's expectation? Like whether it's a small, I don't know. I don't know. I'm curious what that might be.
Well, customer service is part of what we call the customer experience, which is everything dealing with that company. So the customer journey starts when they're just thinking about doing business with you, and it ends when they're thinking about doing business with you again. So proactively, how easy is it for a customer to navigate your website? Do you have contact information on there? If they have to make a reservation, how easy is it to make a reservation? So sometimes, so to give you an example, it could be that the reservation process was easy and one of our guests gets on a plane and travels, let's say, to Miami to join a cruise. It's possible that the airline lost their luggage. So now they're coming to us. They're already in a bad mood because they don't have their luggage for the next week. So how are we going to proactively deal with that? So we know, learning from past experiences, that sometimes people come on board without their luggage. So we have toiletry packs that we can give them. We have tuxedo rentals on board. We can give a tuxedo to the guy for the next night. We have dresses that some of our female crew members are willing to loan out to other guests on board. We have our behind the scenes people in contact with the airlines every step of the way, searching for that piece of luggage. And most times they will forward that luggage to the next port of call that we're going to. So hopefully we'll be able to get that piece of luggage before the cruise is over. Now, and so that's an example of, we didn't create that problem. The airlines created that problem, but we have to deal with it. And so are we just going to say, hey, sorry, not my problem, deal with it on your own? No, we have to be empathetic. And empathy is so important in customer service. You have to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Attitude on the part of the customer is important also. We've had people come on who've lost their luggage who are miserable because they lost their luggage. We've also had people come on board who say, hey, ship happens, it's okay, no problem, we'll deal with it. And so attitude is so very important as well. So learning from past mistakes and being able to cut it off as early as possible is very important in being proactive. But again, it's the entire customer journey that you have to look at. You know, a chief executive or, you know, how many business owners have actually called their own company to see how long it takes to pick up the phone, or to see if it goes right to voicemail, or how many prompts they have to go through before they can talk to a live person. It's all part of the customer journey, the customer experience, of which customer service is just one very small part of it.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, Paul, I see that behind you, your book, Repeat Business. So
how did that get there?
I know. So tell us, is there anything that's in that piece of wisdom? I don't want you to give away the whole book because I naturally want people to purchase a copy, but is there anything in that book that we haven't talked about yet that might be valuable for my listeners today?
Well, first of all, thank you for the plug. I do appreciate that. I placed it perfectly.
You did. Two copies in case I didn't see the first one. I love it.
The book is 50 tips and strategies. There may be 2 or 3 pages long. It's a very quick read called Repeat Business Incorporated, The Business of Staying in Business. And it's because of things we just talked about. Repeat business is so important to every business. You can't keep going out and getting new customers. I think the statistic is it costs 7 to 10 times more money to go out and get a new customer than to keep the customer that you already have. And so why aren't businesses doing everything to get that repeat business? And so in the book, it's 50 tips and strategies. The first section is why customer service is so important. The second section is what your customers are looking for from your business. The third section is what your employees are looking for, because I'm a big believer and a big proponent of employee engagement. So that's the third section. And then the fourth section is what a leader can do and how they can take care of themselves in order to be the best possible leader that they can be. So again, it's repeat business. You want your customers to keep coming back, but you also want your employees to sing your praises. You want them to look forward to coming to work as well. And so, I'll bring up, some people always ask me, is the customer always right? And my goal is, my answer is no, the customer is not always right. But two things. The customer always thinks they're right. So that's an interesting dynamic you have to juggle. And secondly, the customer is always the customer. So you have to create a win-win situation. Even though the customer is not right, they have bad information, you can't make them feel like they're wrong. You have to create a situation where everybody walks away a winner. And so you can say, well, you have the wrong information, but here's what I can do for you. And so, again, I don't believe the customer is always right, but I always believe they're the customer, and you have to treat them that way.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. That's great. Okay, Paul, this is fantastic. So my last question for you before we start to kind of get to the end, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. So let's see how, hopefully this doesn't make you too uncomfortable. Are there any companies out there that you just lift up as kind of gold standards that you'd say, gosh, you know what? If you want to really study a company that you think has got this idea of customer experience down, which ones come to mind for you?
Well, it's funny. I'll give myself another shameless plug. I'm working on my next book, and I've looked into that subject. So if you look at companies like Ritz-Carlton, if you look at companies like Nordstrom, online Zappos, even Amazon, they all get rave reviews for their customer service because they're really doing whatever it takes to make sure that customer comes back. And Amazon, of course, makes it so easy for that customer to keep coming back and back. But let's take Ritz-Carlton for an example. Their motto is ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And that sets the tone. And every employee is empowered. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they have a budget of like $2,000 per person to do whatever it takes to make a situation right. And that's gold. That's so important for the employees to know that they can make something right on their own. They don't have to go to their supervisor or manager. And some of the stories you hear about the lengths that these employees go to is incredible. Flying in certain ingredients for a certain meal or a lost item that they sent back to somebody or had fun with travels and things like that. So those companies really are what I consider to be a gold standard. And you can start with Ritz-Carlton, Nordstrom, all of those companies do a great job.
Paul, this has been absolutely fantastic. I got almost 2 pages of notes here. So, okay, so I ask all my guests this question as we start to kind of get to close. What's one life hack you have for us on how we can either have better relationships or conversations, either at home or at work?
Well, when you ask that question, I immediately go back to the ship because I'm thinking, okay, what have I been through on the ship where I can give a sort of a life hack? And one of the things I try to do is if I have to have an uncomfortable conversation with somebody, I try to get away from my office to do it. I don't want them in my office thinking that they're coming to the principal's office. I want to go outside and maybe take a walk with them, or go out on deck, or get some fresh air, or invite them for a drink at the bar where we can have just a one-on-one conversation. So if you have to have a difficult conversation with somebody, I suggest that you get away from the offices and the rooms that indicate who has the power in a certain situation. Because I've had people where I've had to call people in and they think, oh, I'm coming to the principal's office. And you don't really want to start a difficult conversation in that way. So if you can get away, get outside, get some fresh air, have a walk, and have a conversation that way, I think that takes some of the pressure off of a difficult conversation.
That's beautiful. That's great. I love that. So if people want to learn more about you, buy many multiple copies of your book to give out in the holidays to friends and family, or just follow you in any way, where can they go?
Well, first of all, thank you for that. The book, Repeat Business Incorporated, is on Amazon. My website is www.paulrutterspeaks.com. They can follow me on LinkedIn. I have a Facebook page, Paul Rutter Speaks, on Facebook that I am trying to load content every day up there. I have over 90 blogs on my website about customer service and leadership and communication skills and things like that. So I've written over 90 blogs, and I am writing a new book. I mentioned it. If I can just say that it's going to be called "You Can't Make This Ship Up," and it's
beautiful.
about my trials and tribulations on cruise ships, my 40 years on board, because people are always interested. When I tell them I work on a cruise ship, they say, oh, you must have incredible stories. And to be honest, yes, I do have some incredible
I'm
stories.
sure you do.
And I'm putting them in a book, and it's a leadership business book. It's the subheading is Business Strategies, Life Lessons, and True Stories from 40 Years at Sea. That will be out towards the end of this year. And so I really hope that people will be interested in that, because there's some great stories. I mean, we can take another 2 or 3 podcasts and talk about some of the stories.
Oh, I bet we could. I bet we could. I bet we could. Paul, this was great. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Like I said, I've got almost 2 pages of notes. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, experience, and guidance with us. I think we probably need some of that today more than ever. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I've got lots and lots of notes here. So I'll start right out the gate. The first thing that I learned was take your dog for a walk. You never know where that's going to take you. In the case of Paul, it took him to a 40-year career in the cruise business. But then we really got into these 2 big buckets that I want to talk about that I took notes on, staff and employees. And in both cases, Paul asks business owners the same question. He says, imagine if you were living with your staff 24/7, how would you treat them? And imagine you were living with your employees or your customers 24/7, how would you treat them? And I think that's a nice opening question to that. So on the staff side, he talked about things like, make sure you've got a common objective or purpose. In the case of the cruise business, it's kind of creating those memories so the customer ultimately signs up for another cruise. Celebrate the differences of cruise. And he talked about that, crew members. Celebrate their differences. And then I asked real closely on that. I said, all right, Paul, I hear all the time, people say, I don't have time to celebrate. And he said, yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. And he offered us these 5 Ps, which really were 6 Ps. And if you do the 6 Ps, he said, proper preparation prevents piss-poor performance. I thought that was really good. Proper preparation prevents piss-poor performance. So he said, if we know an employee or staff member or crew member, in this case, is going to have a birthday, we've got that on the books, and we're planning for that. So you really want to plan those celebrations and celebrating wins with your team. So planning, folks. Put it on your Outlook calendar. So with customers, he said, what you want is your customers to have such an experience that they're either not only signing up for more, but they might even be requesting certain employees. He said, we've got folks that come back and sign up for a cruise because they really love that bartender or they love that waiter. So you're trying to get that kind of that competitive edge, because he said you can't compete on price alone. Good reminder for us, price is not going to be the way we want to compete. And then he went into a few more subtle things. He says customers are super forgiving if you solve the problem quickly and right away the first time. And it was subtle in here, but he basically told us customers are always building memories. And we have control of what memories they're building, either the positive memories, or if we don't solve that problem, we don't get back to them, we put them on hold for 10 hours, now they're building memories of a really bad experience, and that's what they're going to leave with. So he said, solve it quick. And he said you can even try and anticipate some of the possible problems they might have, and even have pre-packaged solutions. And he talked about examples of guests that might not have their luggage delivered on time, or even have it at all. And he even reminded us surveys are not a scary thing. We should be really open to surveys and not afraid to hear some of those negative things. And then finally, he said, empathy and attitude are really important. We need to find a way to be empathetic and understand our customers. And he kind of ended our conversation talking about that mantra we've heard before, our customer's always right. And he said, no, they're not always right. But they think they're right. And at the end of the day, the customer is always the customer. So we've got to find a win-win solution that is going to have them walk away feeling satisfied, feeling heard, feeling cared for, and feeling valued. And at the end of the day, isn't that what we all want? We want to feel valued, cared for, and heard. Whether we're employees, customers, family members, spouses, that's what we want in life. So, and then finally, I liked his life hack. If you got to have a difficult conversation, don't do it in the principal's office. To go for a walk outside. He might invite them for a drink, but he takes them someplace else. So as you can see, I got lots of notes, all really practical things that you can start doing right now with your team. because customer service, whether we're an accounting department or we're in a business that sells or provides services directly to customers, we're all in the business of customer service. And this is a great opportunity for us to all get a little bit better. So I can't wait to hear how it works out for you all. I know there's a lot of tips here that I'm going to start putting in place starting tomorrow.
Hey everyone, it's Emily Smith, Creative Director for the Workplace Therapist Show. I wanted to take a minute to say thank you to all of you who've left a comment or a review for the podcast. It means so much and gives us great feedback about how we can improve the show so that we can bring you great content to help you in your daily life, at work, and beyond. This summer, we're on a quest to grow our numbers of reviews so that we can climb up the podcast ladder. In order to entice you to write one, we're giving away an Amazon gift card after every episode in June and July. So please write a review, leave us some stars, and if we choose yours to read on the podcast, we'll send you an Amazon gift card. Who doesn't want something fun from Amazon? Just in case you're wondering what to write, here's a great example from Coach Harlan, who left us 5 stars and wrote, "This is a great podcast. I have really enjoyed the guests and their contributions. The topics are timely and applicable. Brandon has a very easygoing style, a very approachable host who has asked the right questions to get the right answers. Well done." Thanks for a great review, Coach Harlan, and thank you for listening.